Hi, everybody. Today I'm here with Iain Cook-Bonney. Iain, could you start with introducing yourself a little bit and your background around where you got to where you are today?
Sure. Kia ora koutou. Ko Ian Cook-Bonney, toko ingoa. No Ōtepoti aho. I'm currently working with many hats, actually. But one of my hats and what we're talking about today is my work as a resource developer for Technology Education New Zealand. And I've been working on several projects, and one in particular that I'd like to share with you guys today.
Excellent. So, can you give us a little background around what this project is and how, because you do some really great use of technology and educational tools to get kids interested in your subject. So, could you explain that for us?
Yes, this was an interesting one that sort of went through several connections, to be honest. So, one of my other roles is as a PLD facilitator, working with learning architects. And they had recently brought on board another facilitator, ex-principal Matt Bateman. And he and I met and we're talking about what I'd been doing previously and told him about my work uh, directing and leading the STEAM, one of the STEAM clusters here in Dunedin. And I worked with the Otago Peninsula schools from 2019 to, what are we, 2022, I'm going to say. So it was about 4 years, all through COVID, which was fun, which drove some interesting technology choices there too, which actually led to some of this work. So I might come circle back
Okay,
and talk about
cool.
that in a wee minute. Um, and he then said, "Oh, I know someone you should talk to." And he had been working with a interesting guy called James Nicotine, who is the director and founder of Blue Cradle, which is a marine conservation NGO. And he's based here in New Zealand in Christchurch, but he has connections all across the Pacific and into Europe, and there too. And it's quite exciting. So I met up with James. And then after a conversation with him, he said that he was working on a project with the Pōhatu penguin colony and the Helps Conservation Trust. And they were looking at building on some work they had done previously and then using that to create an educational resource. And would I be interested in helping out? And I said, that would be fantastic. And it sounds like something that could be really useful as a TENZ resources too. So I could, sort of help and support that through my TENZ role, and then everybody wins. And that's one of the things that I really like is that if we're doing this sort of mahi and work, that we get that win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah.
So we all met together. We did some Zooms. And it had started out as kind of doing, they had an idea of doing so like an interactive map and then where you could click on different areas and go to different parts and learn about the penguin colony. And then started talking about, and I talked previously with James about the idea of have you considered a virtual version of the penguin colony and making it sort of blowing that up into 3D. So making it an immersive space, a VR sort of space for visitors, students in particular, to come in and see what happens, explore Pōhatu Flea Bay, and learn about penguin conservation. And initially they were like, oh, well, we don't really want to, be putting headsets on people and having to look at lots of headsets and stuff. And then
Mm.
we went through a conversation about how virtual and immersive spaces are actually, they're not limited to headsets. And
Mm.
now, particularly post-COVID, we can do things through our web browsers and things like that too to help bring people into these spaces to meet and collaborate and connect and communicate. And it is a much more immersive type of feeling than, say, for example, what we're in today in
Mm.
Zoom. And we can learn and explore together. And that actually leads me back to circle back to what happened as part of the STEAM cluster So as I said, we started that in 2019, and we would have so 9 schools in the cluster, and we have a big cluster-wide investigation, project-based learning sort of thing. So we were a STEAM cluster, but we leaned heavily into project-based learning and getting into that sort of framework and design thinking. And we would connect and collaborate across the schools to do a big project each year. So our very first project was in conjunction with the Dunedin City Council, and we called it Dunedin 2040 at that stage. And we talked to them and said, what are the major issues facing the city in the next 20 years that you're looking at, so for what Dunedin will look like in Dunedin in 2040. And they were really good, and they came back to us with a whole bunch of questions, and we then went through the process for investigating those sort of systems and things like that too. And it was really powerful, and there was some fantastic learning. And then COVID happened. So normally at the end of sort of that project-based learning, there's some sort of outcome, and in design thinking, there's some sort of way of showing or a product or something like that too. And we wanted to have a public exhibition. And of course, that couldn't happen. We were in lockdown. So I
Yeah.
looked for an alternative.
Pivot.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So what could we do instead? We could go around and take photos of things and do all sorts of bits and pieces, and um, but it just wasn't quite the same. It didn't have
Mm.
quite the same feeling.
Yeah.
And that was when I stumbled across a platform called Frame VR, which was similar in those days to something like Mozilla Hubs, which was around in those days. It was sort of that web-based immersive space. And I actually reached out to the VP, one of the founders of it, who's Gabe Baker, who had previously been working with Verbella, which is a big 3D immersive space provider, but it's bigger and different. And this one point of difference was it was web-based. You could access it from any device pretty much. You could be on your laptop, but on a Chromebook or on an iPhone, or any sort of like a cell phone or an iPad. Uh, Anyone with a device could pretty much
Mm.
take part.
Much more accessible.
Much more accessible, exactly.
You share
And
that it's like, and COVID really did bring up the, the digital inequalities. I don't want to say digital
yeah,
divide, but,
yeah,
that highlighted it a lot. So
yeah,
it would have been
exactly.
interesting times for you.
Yes. And so this gave us the opportunity to create an immersive 3D space, or a space where people could walk through, and just like if they were at an exhibition,
Mhm.
and they could go through the space, they could look at the exhibits, and it was a collaborative space. So if you had your mic turned on, you could be talking to other people in the space. You could do all sorts of things that you would normally do in a physical space, which was a bit of a game changer at that
Yeah.
time. And there were many spaces and things like that too. And we had hundreds of people through that. So we had a big public exhibition, virtual one, through there, and had lots of people there. And Frame VR were very kind to support that, and sort of opened up our user base so we could have 100 people at a time at that time in there too, which was pretty good. And it was very successful. So I don't know. Don't know how we're going for time, but I can quickly see if I can show you.
What
Um,
age group were the kids that you were dealing with in the
this
STEM
was
sector?
Yeah. So that's a good question. This was full primary. So we had exhibits from everywhere, from new entrant kids all the way up to year eights.
Amazing.
And that too. So all across it, and a variety of different things. So we would have physical things like 3D, like physical models of solutions. So it's like one of the issues we were looking at were like the rising sea level in South Dunedin and things like that, and solutions for that. We were looking at green infrastructure and making vibrant central city and all sorts of things. So we had plans for redeveloping the central city, for putting in green roofs and all sorts of
Mm. And
interesting solutions around there too.
it sounds like you would really get a lot of engagement from the kids. I mean, I would have loved to do something like that as a student myself. And we've done similar things at schools that I've taught at, but just that buy-in for the real relevant project that these kids can actually
Mm,
see. And I mean, the fact that the council sort of, came on board and came up with some questions and you could interact with them is huge. Like engaging that community and engaging, um, yeah, everything around you to get people involved and get kids involved. That's such a great idea.
yeah. And it was. And I think, yeah, that really drove engagement, particularly because we were in those sort of tricky times.
Mm,
Um, where you would have, kids working from home, where, lockdowns and things like that. So having a project like that was highly engaging, but also had that authentic context, that
yeah.
outcome. We're developing solutions for something that actually matters and real and is going to affect you, when you grow up, if you're still here in Dunedin
Mm,
in a years' time, you could be part of the solutions that you see in that
yeah.
time.
And it would be
So,
really neat to have this across New Zealand, because everyone's got their own sort of unique eco climate in their community and the needs and wants of what you would need in Dunedin as opposed to what we would need here in Taranaki would be quite
yeah.
different. There'd be
Mm.
similarities, obviously, but it would be quite an interesting experiment to have it across the whole of New Zealand and all these little
Wow.
communities.
Stay tuned, because some of these units I'm taking and developing for TENZ. So
Yep.
Dunedin 2040 is actually turning into your place 2050.
Yay.
So that we can, it can be, as you said, it can be applied to any,
Yeah.
place in the creator or any place in the world, really.
And did you
Uh,
use the UN Sustainable Goals at all when you were looking at
Yes,
this?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
so they've been a sort of an underpinning point across all of these different units, is
Mm.
highlighting some of those things. And you'll see those, particularly later on, we would post them into the exhibit. If I can get my fingers to work quickly enough, I'll see if I can show you in a wee bit. Uh, and the other thing was, having those authentic clients. So we had the council had sent through the questions, but we followed that up with like, webinar series and things like that. So we were actually talking to them and getting feedback and saying this is what we want, and they were explaining the issues and what they were trying to do and what they thought, and then, really working alongside and working with the students.
Yeah.
And there's great buy-in from that when they have being able to talk to actual clients. It's not just something that's kind of vague from a workbook or something
Yeah.
that's come out of
It
somewhere.
brings it
Yeah,
into life, doesn't it? I've had
yeah,
several experiences with kids as well in a similar sense where they've met the council or they've met a product designer and they've discussed their idea with a product designer for something they had done. And just the realization that it's an actual thing, you know.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
quite it just completely changes your mindset. And same for the
Mm,
teacher. I think the teacher gets a lot out of it as well. We
yeah,
are seen as the
absolutely.
fountains of all knowledge, but knowing that something that you've sort of come up with does connect with people in a real world sense, and can create that student agency when you can see your students getting that, it's very rewarding.
Mm, yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
is too. So we followed that up the following year with actually at the end of that year, I was sort of keeping my eye because I was like, what big things are happening that we could wrap our heads around and for in the next year. So the next year, and put my eyes on the mission to Mars. So that was with it because we had our curious curiosity and such forth going to Mars and things like that too. So I actually did some Facebook and LinkedIn stalking and connected with the head of STEAM education at NASA. Um,
Cool.
and so we had a great connection with them, and then Ota Lutz, who is fantastic.
Mm,
Still talk to her on LinkedIn. And so we had our Mission to Mars unit the following year. And it was still we were still in COVID situation. We were still having lockdowns. So again, we thought we were getting out of it, and then snap bang
Back in.
before we were back into lockdown. So I was like, oh, okay, here we go with another virtual. Well, I think actually that year we managed to have a limited face-to-face public exhibition, which was great.
Mm.
And so we combined it to have a virtual one as well, and doing that too. But again, having those really authentic clients, like we had our launch and we had it live, have a Zoom like this, and we were talking with them live from the JPL, call it the playground.
Mm.
And because have they actually have two Curiosity rovers. So one is on Mars, of course, and the other is here on Earth. And what they do is they program the Earth one first in the playground and make sure it's doing what it does, and then they send it off.
Mm.
So we had a Zoom live from there, and they rolled it out of its little garage. And it was really, really interesting to see the kids' faces because we've been talking about this, but you see the images, but often you don't see the scale.
Yeah.
So a lot of them had sort of thought it's the size of a cat kind of thing here
Mm.
too. And this thing rolls out and it's the size of a mini.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's big. It's big. And they
Puts
were
things
like,
into
wow.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And it puts it into perspective. But that really ignited them and thing there too. And then we had some other people, on board and talking to them as well. And that really um, connected the dots, even like back here to Aotearoa, with our connection to space exploration. We actually
Mm.
have a deep connection here in aerospace and in space
Mm.
because of, we've got some really high flying and innovative space agents, space agencies with
Mm.
Dawn Aerospace and co. And also through like the International Antarctic Centre and things like that, a lot of through Christchurch, a lot of people our space agencies are going to Antarctica because it is one of the best places on Earth to test conditions for out in space, which I didn't know before I started this, and
No,
I had a lot of
not
learning
knowing
around
that.
it.
Guess that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Um, it does because yeah, we can spend time talking about that, but
Mm.
that was a real mind opener for a lot of students too, is actually, New Zealand has quite a big part to play because they'll
Mm.
often they'll flow through Christchurch and the Space Centre and some of the like the European Space Agency, I think the Americans as well, they all have offices here at the Christchurch Airport, and they'll go through down to
Mm.
Antarctica to test equipment and things like that too. And in fact, our new Scott base in Antarctica, which has just been built and modelled, was actually designed under the principles that it would work on the moon. So
Really?
it's the same as a moon or a Mars thing. That's the same condition. Yeah. So
Wow.
all the things. So and all these little connections being made, which are really
Yeah.
cool.
This is
So
amazing though, Ian. This is obviously driven a lot by your curiosity and your wanting to get involved. And when I think about sort of project-based learning and place-based learning and STEM and STEAM. I think there's hurdles that are there for people,
mm,
and definitely one of them is potentially. I mean, I know we're all teachers, but I know a lot of teachers that would not want to stand up in assembly, for example, and address a bunch of people, and they don't want to cold call, the Rocket Lab or
yeah.
somebody, and so it takes that. Courage to see the bigger idea and to have the courage to call those people and break those barriers down because I know from experience that of people I've spoken to, everyone is really willing to give information and help
Mm,
and mentors and come and talk to classes. But whether it's a time barrier, whether it's a courage thing or not, lots of teachers don't.
yeah.
Not lots, that's an
No,
assumption,
yeah,
but it is definitely it's driven by an enthusiastic, curious teacher, which you obviously are.
definitely. And I would say, if I've got a message for teachers out there, it would be give it a go. Because I
Yeah.
was like that too. I was like, oh, doing that. And I don't know what happened one day in my brain. I just said, let's give it a go.
Yeah. I mean,
And I
you
think the
literally have
mindset
nothing to
was,
lose.
you have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
They'll either say ignore it. Well, they'll
Yeah.
say no, I'm too busy. But most of the time they'll say, thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
I'd love to help, and they do. Or
Yeah.
I'd love to help, but I can't do it now. Or can I point you in the direction of someone else?
Mm.
But 9 times out of 10, now they'll be trying to help because
Yeah,
they're genuinely
absolutely.
good people
I
out there.
I
Yeah.
agree with people I've contacted in New Plymouth for things as well. I had some boys that were designing a hydrogen engine. So it just so happens that Hurringa Hydrogen Energy is in New Plymouth and they do hydrogen transport vehicles. And I had contacted them and they came in and we ended up doing a big chat in the staff room and they sent some engineers in and um, it was pretty over their heads to be perfectly honest,
Hmm.
but it was that was irrelevant. And these engineers were just so happy to see these year 10 boys that were just passionate about what they were doing. And then all of these year 13s looking at career pathways of what they could potentially do.
Hmm.
So while they were talking the lingo that was not aimed at students, it was cool and interesting. And it was they were so happy with how engaged the kids are. I think you've got to give these kids credit that they're gonna ask the right questions and they will get involved. If they see their teachers putting the effort in and asking questions and being curious, then that's what they're gonna do too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I think from the STEAM cluster is where I'm heading with this is we had this
Mm,
ongoing use and relationship built up with the Frame VR platform. So which was really nice. And we'd continue to use it. Now I got, pretty good at using the platform and it's not hard to use. So that when it got to that point that I was talking with Pōhatu penguins, I could say to them quite clearly, I think we could use this to satisfy what you really want to get to. And I showed them the virtual exhibits and I showed them how it worked, and they were very keen on that too. And then that project started from there, really.
mm,
And it was about what sort of parameters, what are your needs, what sort of functionality do you want out of this too?
mm,
And we had a whole list of things, and it's an ongoing list that keeps growing. But the key thing is they wanted a way to showcase their part of the world, because Flea Bay is a beautiful spot, but it's not easy for everybody to get to. Uh, and they're doing great work there, and they've got a particularly special breed of penguin there too that they want to conserve. So we wanted a way to bring that to the world. So what I did was look for a way to recreate it in VR for there too. So there was a bit of learning from me there too. So I was actually lucky that Land Information New Zealand, they have a data service, and they had just, I think the year before or something like that, done a flyover of Banks Peninsula and done a 1 meter resolution LiDAR scan of it. So that meant for all us techies out there, I could get a height map from that, and then I could use that to generate some 3D terrain. So I could actually use that data to recreate the landscape of Lee Bay, and then we could start populating it with all the things in there too. And then, while we were doing this, Frame VR itself had been rapidly developing with new features. So one of the really exciting things about that, and it's very topical at the moment, is they started bringing AI into it as well. So originally, when I was building it, we were putting in 3D models of the staff and the conservationists there, so that when you're walking around the space, you could go and sort of walk up to them, and they might have a speech bubble above them or a sound bite or something like that too. But what that's changed to now is now we have AI 3D avatars in there too. So you can walk around and you can go up to them and you can chat with them. So you can click on in the text chat and you can be writing and asking them questions in there. You can even just chat to them like they were an ordinary person through their microphone, so you can use your voice. So it's really accessible.
that's incredible.
It is incredible
Really.
to think that you can get this, and we've got them to write bios and descriptions of what their knowledge are. So it's load those avatars are loaded up with, very concise, personalized information about themselves, so about what they do, not themselves necessarily, because we're always writing this for students, so that when they're using it, they're going to be responding in a way that's suitable and appropriate for them, and it's going to help them with their learning. But that sort of shifted, a lot of the work that was
Mm.
in there because we no longer needed to have lots of text, although there are, these text in there,
Yeah,
but it changes a whole lot of the way that it works in there too. So that was quite exciting as well.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, we're going to have to stop, Ian. We've barely even
Gosh,
scratched the
it's gone quick.
surface of what we need to talk about.
Oh,
We might have to come
yes.
back and do another one, and we can
Part
like
two.
narrow down
Yes.
a little bit more on what we're going to discuss
Yeah.
because you've obviously, like I said, quite a passionate teacher who's very
Mm.
driven, and you've got a lot of really cool projects. We've really haven't even discussed fully yet. So
No.
we'll have to come back and do another one.
Yep, sounds good. Yes, we can do some show and tell. I
Yes,
think
that'll
would
be
be good.
perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
All right,
Nice.
thank you.
Okay. No problem. Cheers.